Hey everyone, Sam here. Let's get started. Good to see everyone. Hope you had a great weekend. And we are going to continue on with our theme of supply and demand zones that work. So, remember, we are, the purpose of these sessions is because there's a lot of flawed supply and demand strategy information out there. I developed this strategy many years ago on the trading floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I was down there in the mid-90s and really focused on how markets really work, exactly how and why prices turn and move in markets. And all the strategy rules are developed off that. Translating that information onto a price chart is what the strategy was all about. And we still stick to the original supply demand rules here at the Pinnacle Institute and for our trading. So let's go over another piece of information today. And in these sessions, we always use current opportunities in the markets. And we certainly have more today. Big move in the markets today. Let's go look at it in just a moment. Remember, I am a licensed fund manager, and but the Pinnacle Institute is not an investment advisor. Trading and risking your hard-earned money in the markets certainly comes with no guarantee of success. And actually, available research does suggest that the average, that the majority of active traders lose money. So I've done YouTube sessions on that before. Very important that you understand that. No reason to rush into this. Make sure you understand what you're doing. Make sure you understand risk and you're okay with risk. And if you're not, this business is not for you, because you definitely are going to take on risk if you get involved in trading and investing. So if we think of the past week or two, the major stock markets around the world had a big drop, and then today they reached some of our demand zones. We'll go over that in a minute, and started to rally. But remember that we went over this one last week. I believe it was last week, right? When the NASDAQ left us a nice footprint of supply up here. See the chart I'm looking at right here. So there was a supply zone. And at the moment, when we were going over that, these are our live sessions with our members here. As you can see on the left side, these are our members in the chat interacting with each other and with us. But here, while I was delivering this session and going over this supply zone, at that point, price was right here. So I didn't know. I mean, this is the day session NASDAQ, but price was not up necessarily at the supply zone at that moment. So do we know for sure that price is going to get up there? Do we know for sure when price is going to get to that supply zone? No, we don't know that for sure. But if it does, and that's the point, structure-wise, location-wise, this zone met our criteria. So if price did rally up to there, right, probability and profit zone suggest it's likely to end up somewhere down here where all of this trading activity is. See the trading activity down here and the supply zone all the way up here? This area is going to be typically a magnet for price. Okay. So we can see what happened after that. Obviously, price did rally up to the supply zone a couple days later, and then proceeded to drop and drop pretty far. That's a big drop in the NASDAQ. This decline took prices down to a demand zone that is really the low of the day today, right? Today's Monday, and we had a big drop over the past 2-3 days from that supply zone I just showed you down to the 14,530-ish demand zone right down here. It's another zone we've been going over with our members from last week and before. And, you know, it wasn't until very early this morning that price came down here. Then the stock market opened and price came down here again, made a new low right into the zone, and has now rallied. The NASDAQ's rallied over 200 points this morning so far from the demand zone. Okay, but remember, this demand zone is very far from the supply zone that it fell from last week. It's all about probability and profit zone. That's what this whole game is about. Identifying proper supply demand zones using that structure location analysis, and that's all from the original supply demand strategy rules. Okay. Now, I want to get into something else here. So not only did the NASDAQ come into demand today, but the S&P did as well. But notice the S&P, that's this zone right here. This is today. This doesn't look like much of a rally from the demand zone, but it went deep into the demand zone, and the S&P has had a pretty big rally so far today. Again, things could, we'll see where things go from here. But the point I want to make here is notice prior to today, prices already been back to this demand zone over here. So this is not a fresh demand zone. One of the rules from the original supply demand strategy is the rule of 50%, meaning until price trades 50% or greater into a demand or supply zone, we expect that zone still has a pretty good chance of working out again. So if this first pullback took prices more than 50% into the level, we would not be using it like we did for this morning session, if that makes sense. Okay. Remember, in each demand zone is a certain amount of demand, right? There are unfilled buy orders at multiple price points inside the demand zone. So the first pullback here that was very shallow, barely touched the zone and took off, right? That was earlier in the month. The buy orders sitting at all the price points below that, yet still inside the demand zone, have not been filled. So, and that's why we get the turn in this zone again here today, right? Whereas the NASDAQ this morning, this was the first time back into the zone. Okay. It's yellow. If you're wondering why the zone is yellow, because it's a high probability zone based on location. So we color code our supply demand zones based on probability. So over the past week, all we've done is traded from the supply zone, NASDAQ supply zone of 15,300 down to the demand zone of 14,530. And now we're getting a rally from that zone so far. Okay. So wanted to go over that. Wanted to go over that rule of 50%. And we will be back tomorrow with more supply demand zones that work and why.